When we think of Napoleon Bonaparte, we usually think of the icon. We see the man on the white horse, the hand tucked into his waistcoat, the conqueror who redrew the map of Europe and changed the course of modern history. We think of a man of cold, mathematical precision, a strategist who moved armies like chess pieces. But if you look at the letters he wrote to his wife, Josephine, between 1796 and 1812, that icon starts to crack. You find a man who is almost impossible to reconcile with the legend. In these pages, the monster of Europe and the genius of the battlefield disappears, and in his place is someone much more human, much more vulnerable, and often much more desperate. To understand the man, you have to understand the era. This isn't just a collection of love letters, it is a primary source window into the soul of a man who was simultaneously a ruthless, microscopic strategist and a man possessed by an intense, almost singular devotion. The letters span the most transformative years of his life, starting when he was a rising general in Italy and ending when he was the emperor of the French, facing the crumbling edges of his empire. The story begins in 1796. At this stage, Napoleon isn't the master of Europe. He is a young, ambitious general working for the French Directory. He is in Italy, and his military successes are coming fast. We see him at the Bridge of Lodi and during the occupation of Milan. These weren't just military victories, they were the moments where Napoleon realized he could use war as a tool for political power. He wasn't just fighting for France, he was building a brand. He used the spoils of war, gold from Italy, and looted art, to secure the loyalty of his troops and to buy political favor back in Paris. He was learning early on that power isn't just about winning battles, it's about managing the resources and the people that follow those battles. But there is a profound duality in these early years. While he was managing the grand strategy of a campaign, he was also acting as his own war, foreign, and admiralty officers. He had a telescopic vision for the big picture, but a microscopic eye for the tiniest details of administration. Yet, while he was performing these massive, world-altering maneuvers, he was also writing letters to Josephine that are startlingly intense. He was a man of extreme dualities. On one hand, he could be incredibly brutal. During the suppression of Pavia, he ordered executions and allowed for the pillaging of the city to maintain control. He was capable of a cold, calculated ruthlessness that made him a terrifying figure to his enemies. But then, he would turn his attention to Josephine, and the language changes entirely. He becomes gentle, almost fragile. He expresses a level of emotional vulnerability that seems completely at odds with the man who was just ordering the destruction of a city. As the years pass, the letters track his evolution from a soldier seeking to gild his sword with political prestige to a ruler whose private life is inextricably linked to the stability of his empire. As he secures treaties in Rome and expands French influence, his focus shifts. The excitement of the initial conquest begins to give way to the heavy, complicated pressures of empire. He starts to struggle with the balance between his burgeoning political necessity and his personal passions. This is where the tension in the letters becomes most palpable. Napoleon's letters reveal a man plagued by presentiments, a word he uses often regarding Josephine's faithfulness. As he moves from being a general to being a statesman and eventually an emperor, his insecurity grows. He is constantly torn between the public image he must maintain and the private reality of his marriage. He is a man who can command millions of soldiers, yet he feels he cannot command the loyalty of the woman he loves. This creates a fascinating, often painful, tension. His domestic life becomes a microcosm of the massive geopolitical shifts he is orchestrating. Just as he is trying to stabilize a chaotic Europe under French rule, his own household is a source of constant, restless energy. The letters also show us how he used art and wealth as a form of political currency. He wasn't just collecting beautiful things, he was using the spoils of his conquests to lubricate the wheels of politics. He understood that culture and gold were just as important as gunpowder when it came to maintaining power. This shows us that his strategic mind didn't turn off when he left the battlefield, it simply applied itself to new, more complex arenas. As we move into the middle period, the letters become more burdened. The raw, passionate energy of the young conqueror in Italy is replaced by the complex, often weary communications of a man who is increasingly isolated by his own power. He is no longer just a man in love, he is an emperor whose every move is scrutinized. The social pressures of Josephine's circle and the political requirements of the French state begin to squeeze the space he has for his private self. You can see him trying to manage it all: the wars, the treaties, the administration of a continent, and the complicated, often unrequited intensity of his marriage. By the time we reach the end of the collection in 1812, the era is clearly changing. The letters conclude as the Napoleonic era reaches its breaking point. The man who once seemed unstoppable is now a man whose private life and public empire are both under immense strain. The correspondence ends as the grand dream of a unified Europe under French rule begins to fracture. When we look back at these letters, we have to remember that they are a subjective source. Napoleon was a master of image, and even in his most intimate moments, he was a man who understood the power of a narrative. He was, in many ways, curating his own emotional state. We can't know for certain if his fears of Josephine's infidelity were based on reality, or if they were a projection of his own restless nature. We can't know if the gentleman in the letters was the real man, or if the ruthless general was the mask. But that's perhaps the point. The letters don't give us a simple answer, they give us the tension. They show us that the myth of Napoleon, the cold, calculating genius, is only half the story. The other half is a man driven by an almost irrational, overwhelming passion that often worked against his own strategic interests. He was a man who could manage the minute administrative details of an entire continent, yet he could be completely undone by a single doubt about a woman's heart. In the end, these letters do something that history books often fail to do. They bridge the gap between the monumental and the personal. They show us that the massive, sweeping movements of history, the treaties, the battles, the fall of empires, are not just abstract forces. They are driven by individuals with all the flaws, insecurities, and intense emotions that come with being human. Napoleon Bonaparte was a man of extremes, and through his own words, we see that his greatest struggle wasn't just against the armies of Europe, but against the complexities of his own character.